All right. Good morning, everyone. We are in day 2 of our talks with Marilyn. Today we have Emily Puthoff and Elena Snyzek from the Hudson Valley Bee Habitat joining us at 11 o'clock. And then at 11:30, Crystal Brown will join us. And then Marilyn and I will wrap up with some discussion afterwards. Feel free to use the chat or the comments in the YouTube section should be live today. And just so we all know, I can share screens. So if anybody wants me to visit websites, I can do that with ease. We had some bumps in the road yesterday, but I think we're all smoothed out. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next artist. From their website, there's a quote: "How might we leverage art, science, and contemplative arts to reconnect people with nature and to help save the bees?" The Hudson Valley Bee Habitat was founded in 2016 when 3 artists, Emily Puthoff, Elena Snyzek, and Jennifer Wooden, asked this very question. Our mission is to utilize our expertise as artists, designers, and mindful educators to pollinate public engagement with bees and the environment and each other in order to help both humans and the bees survive. Emily Puthoff is a sculptor, bee habitat designer, art educator for over 20 years, and beekeeper. When she took up beekeeping by accident a few years ago, she rediscovered the beauty and wonder of the natural world, and she committed to leveraging her creativity to save the bees. Emily is a 2016 and 17 National Arts Strategies Creative Community Fellow, 2017 and 18 Good Work Institute Fellow, and a 2018 Sustainability Faculty Fellow at SUNY New Paltz, where she heads the sculpture program. Elena Snyzek is an artist, educator, and beekeeper. She has, for over 20 years, experience as a teaching artist pre-K to college in Chicago, Arizona, and New York. As a resident of Kingston since 2005, Elena is excited to collaborate with educators, youth, and community members with projects involving art, environmental education, and bees. Welcome to the studio, Emily and Elena. I'm going to let you guys talk with Marilyn for about a half hour. Like I said, I can share the screen. I will dip out of the conversation so you guys can have a little one-on-one and talk about your practices and your time at Ohio University with Marilyn. However you want. This is an informal discussion, and I look forward to hearing about your practices.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in your yard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my house. Well, this is my everything right now. School, house. Yeah, it looks like I'm in a greenhouse, but this is just, I have a big window here and it's the best view.
Yeah. Yeah. What
so you're in a rural, it's kind of rural up there too as well, right? Around Kingston?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much like Athens, this area. You know, there's the Catskill Mountains, lots of hiking. And then New Paltz, it reminds me of Athens. It's sort of like small, hippie college town. Yeah, so very similar. Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys listened in yesterday, but I felt like I talked about my work a lot. So I'm kind of anxious to, just hear about maybe some of what you've been doing and how the bee habitat kind of fits with everything else that you are up to.
Cool. Do you want to?
What have we been doing? Well, we've been doing a lot of sort of planning for the future because of COVID-19. We had a lot of projects that we had to put on hold like most people do, but one exciting project that we hope to resume in January is on a piece of land in Kingston. And it's a collaboration between the YMCA teens, the YMCA Farm Project, which is another nonprofit in Kingston, and a design team called Con Design and us to create a pollinator sculpture and garden on this piece of land. So we're going to collaborate with the teens to do the sculpture, and Con Design is going to collaborate with them to do the garden. And then the project has several phases. So after that phase, there's going to be a second like sort of round or year where we do community engagements on the site.
Yeah, we were awarded a Department of Environmental Conservation community impact grant, and for $100,000. So
Wow.
it's the biggest grant we've ever gotten.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's going to really support our vision for this idea of like public pollinator sculpture and gardens and the programming and the education around it. Elena was really the powerhouse grant writer on that. she did a lot of that, did a lot of the heavy lifting on that.
It's not really fun writing government grants. I can say that. It was pretty.
Yeah, but I think it's, some people seem to manage to do it, and some of us seem to not do it as well. So it's great that you guys were able to do that. Can you talk about the idea of pollinator sculpture
Sure.
a little more?
Yeah, sure. So we are making sculpture at a scale that's for like a personal size sculpture for people to hang in their yards to support pollinators, and also large scale public sculpture and gardens. And the sculpture, it's aesthetic, and it's also very functional. So it includes nesting material for solitary bees and butterflies and some birds and bats and stuff. So it's we're using the arts to get people excited about having these habitats around and supporting the pollinators by hanging it in their yards. It's a pretty easy thing to do. And we have a few examples of stuff. Like this is some of our first, oh, the light on that is weird. Some of our first 3D printed pollinator habitat
This is
models
a
and
ceramic one. There's the nesting tubes inside this pattern. This is a very simple mason jar one, which would have tubes inside. And we've done this with projects with communities and groups where they make their own pollinator habitat that they can put outside in their yard.
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so it has, it has the whole social sculpture aspect
Yeah, no kidding.
as well. Yeah.
I think I read Energy Plan for the Western Man right after I graduated by Joseph Beuys. I was really psyched and inspired by that, but it's like many, many years later until that came back around. And Emily read the same book, like we read it separately.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
Marilyn,
It's hard. It's a difficult way to think. I mean, it's a real shift for artists, I think, to deal in community from being trained in private studio.
Yeah, it is a real shift. Yeah, it was like, how to, reading that and getting excited about it, but then like, how do you get there? How do you do it? And
yeah, it's interesting now. Our practice is all intertwined. So it's teaching, it's art, it's our life. Everything is sort of meshed together.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't say that like I wouldn't have a private studio practice again, but I definitely think that this is my art practice right now, doing this project, and it's definitely very involved. So it will be for the next like 2.5 years, and I don't know, maybe at some point I'll go back into more of a making artworks in a studio. But for now, I think this is what I'm doing.
In the public space, is it a public garden already, or are you starting from scratch with getting land and setting it up? And I guess, I know I worked a little bit with the university with just public work on campus, and there isn't always a provision within the funding to do maintenance and keep things going. So sometimes gets to be a little issue there. I was wondering if that was part of what you were doing or how you deal with that.
We have it in our contract. The land is owned by the Kingston Land Trust, and we have it in our contract that they will continue to maintain the land and the sculpture.
We maintain it during the project,
but we maintain it.
They'll maintain it.
We have a pretty close relationship with them, so I think that, you know, we'll probably work with them to say, hey, these are things need to be done, because they get pretty busy too, and they have a lot of projects going, and I think they could easily forget. So I think we can remind them and collaborate with them on it. But it was important to us, like, that we weren't that didn't rely solely on us, because if you think about it, our goal is to do many projects over many years, and then maintaining all those projects in different places can really get overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a big part of doing the arts programming, to get the community involved too, and to have them just invested in the life of the project, invested in its growth,
so that it can maintain itself over time.
Yeah.
Courtney is indicating that she has some images. Do you have images that you want to show?
Do you want to show our website?
Or the images we have in the show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. Courtney, do you have those?
Courtney?
Oh, I see in the chat.
She's in chat.
Okay. I'll chat back with her.
Yeah, that's good. You answer.
Maybe you guys can't hear me without me being in the stream.
Well,
You did hear me?
Yes.
I can do either. Would you like us, to go to your website, or do you want to look at some of the there are the images that you emailed me?
Yeah, let's show those, because those are the most.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So this image, we created an arbor at this very cool place. It's a seed sanctuary where they're growing seeds for indigenous communities. These seeds are endangered. In one case, there was 1 or 2 ears of this Mohawk red corn that they were able to grow out and give back to the Akwesasne tribe, like tons and tons of seed the next year. So we are invited to create an arbor that's an entrance into this sanctuary. It's called the Akwesasne Seed Rematriation Garden. And so we were invited to collaborate with the Akwesasne leaders to come up with the design. And Mary Arquette, who was one of the leaders, she came up with the idea to use the Haudenosaunee Hiawatha belt design, which is, it symbolizes the great law of peace between 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee. So we just thought that was a really, really great metaphor for this idea of living sustainably together, you know. So that's all made out of raw cedar that we harvested locally. That was the first time I've ever worked just with raw woodworking without any kind of like major tools or processing of the wood. So that was really a wonderful
The only
experience.
things that aren't, I guess, found or taken from nature in the sculpture are some of the hardware, like the nails to put the cedar together, and the hardware to stick, like to secure the sculpture into the ground.
Yeah.
But everything else is a product of nature. Yeah,
we needed to engineer it so it could move, because they were moving the garden year to year around the land that it was on. So we had to drive these galvanized spikes into the ground and figure out how to do that so it would fit every year. So it's constructed also to come apart in 3 pieces. That was another kind of design challenge for that.
It's been moved. It's been relocated once.
Mm-hmm.
So it was designed to be relocated. I don't know, Dwayne always talks in his class about deconstruction, reconstruction. I guess this is a good example of that. Yeah. But yeah, we're hoping that it can find a permanent home, though, that they've kind of settled on a piece of farmland they're going to use long term.
These the things that are across the top, those are symbolic of from the Native American tribe.
Yeah, they represent. There's 5 nations in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy: the Seneca, Onondaga, Oneonta, Mohawk, and Cuyahoga. Oh. And those 5 forms represent those nations, and it's a symbol of their peace treaty among each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm thinking about, kind of trying to take this all in, is the decisions that you have to make in order to decide what you present, I guess, online or on your website, because you just have to make such kind of small windows into it and make them visually and in text when the project is so large that it seems like that side of it there must be a lot to learn about how that's done.
Yeah, I think we're still learning.
Yeah. We'd like to work with someone on website design, either hire someone or have, a really great graphic design student intern with us and work with them on fine tuning that. Yeah, just even there's so much information about bees that we could convey, but how do you put that in a way that's like it's ingestible for people to take, and use. So these are examples of our hexagonal solitary bee habitats that are going to be as part of the grant. The teenagers are going to help us co-design the stainless steel grills that go on the outside of them, and they'll be stacked together, and they'll figure out how they actually arrange them in space too on the property as well.
So those are made as they're both images, but then the bees can actually enter through the openings.
Yeah. So the stainless steel grill, it's aesthetically, it's appealing, but it's also protects the bee tubes from getting a lot of wetness or having birds come and take the tubes out and have lunch, on the bee, little bee babies. Yeah, but don't they also just like to use them for nests? Yeah, they like to take them for nesting. So they just like to take them. Yeah. Even if I could pack them in so tight and
and without having a cover on it, the birds will still get in there and take them. Some of them, not all of them, but a few. And that causes everything to sort of shift and fall out. So
is part of the plan to distribute the habitats, that the small habitats or things that would go in people's yards beyond your area there? For example, could we get some in Athens? Is there a component of your website to order them or something? Is that part of it, or does that make it a kind of commercial enterprise that's an interference?
So that is part of it. That's part of a longer term vision. Right now we are we're perfecting the ceramic bee habitats for
commercial sale.
We are a limited liability company, so we're
actually not a nonprofit.
We're not a nonprofit. So we're gonna sell them to support our work.
Right.
The mission.
We're an LLC that works with a fiscal sponsor. I mean, I feel like there's no shame. I mean, I guess if we were just sticking to, our closest values, it would be strictly working in the community. But to get more people involved means that, selling ceramic habitat and putting that back into the projects that we want to do is a really useful tool. And so, why not?
Have you thought about internships of some kind? That might be an interesting way also to kind of propagate or move things to different parts of the country if other artists came and worked with you for a while. And I'm not volunteering, but I could imagine someone might.
You'll be our first intern. I love that idea. I think we're still capacity building, in terms of what we can take on and do.
We have more requests to do things than we can manage. I'd love to say yes to everyone. People, the idea would be to start locally and then take what we're doing to other cities and towns. But our personal capacity at the moment to do that would really mean we would have to quit our jobs and do this full time, because Emily works full time and I work almost full time too. So I think that's, we might come to a place where we want to do that, especially if there's a universal healthcare program in this country, but right now we've talked about it and we pretty much like the stability of our income that our jobs provide for us. So we kind of think about what is our capacity to do, projects at any given place and time. And we've kind of figured like one large scale project at a time. And then, maybe we'll start in Kingston and then take it to other places.
So I want to share just for a moment about a couple things, a couple ways in which, Marilyn, you've impacted my life as a sculptor. I just want to share those with you.
Sure.
So you mentioned internships, and I got a women's studio workshop internship, which is it's 15 minutes away from where we live, right, in Rosendale, New York.
Oh, yeah.
I got that after I graduated because of an assignment you gave in, a senior seminar class where you're like, okay, Emily, you have internships, research internships, and then give a presentation on it. I actually applied to internships as part of the research, got got the internship. So when I applied to New Paltz to teach, I had already known about the campus because I used to come to the library. You know, as a poor intern, I didn't have any other money to do anything else. So I'd come to the library to hang out. So I already knew the climate and the town and the area. And then the chair of the search committee, after my interview, had dinner with the directors of the Women's Student Workshop. So I think that had a really, really good, impact.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's the way things are supposed to work.
Yeah.
You're a teacher and you just make a little motivational assignment, and then it impacts in a large way. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I would have never thought of it.
Yeah. The other thing is that I decided to become a sculptor after I took your 3D design class.
Well, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. So I remember you were like, okay, go out and find stuff. And so I went out and found materials. I found a tire and some plastic forks in the dumpster. So I came back and made this tire plastic fork sculpture. And it was so fun and exciting that I was like, oh my God, I love this. And I think I'm a sculptor, and had no idea what a sculptor was or what they would do with their lives. But I just sort of was hooked by that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you can never imagine, I think, when you're a student in a class and you start doing something, what that could lead to.
Yeah.
And I think if you try to think about what it could lead to, it actually starts really limiting. So you're willing to go with that sort of excitement about it. So I think that's a great thing. That's what I would want for everyone.
Yeah. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. I also have this picture. That's funny. Well, you're not in it, but we were debating whether you took it or not.
I think you took it, actually.
It's us.
But you probably don't remember.
Closer.
Christina and Teresa. And that was 1996.
Oh, yeah, that's up there on the green.
Yeah.
Wow,
that's a
good artifact.
Yeah, we were trying to remember if we had coffee with you or something, or that day.
I think we did something, but
yeah.
I don't know. I remember doing some projects with people up there, or students had projects, and we'd go up there sometimes to talk about them. So it could have been part of that. I have no idea. That's interesting. Yeah. I have to say, Elena, every time I have a plastic packaging and think about pouring plaster in those, and I have done that with students a lot just to kind of show them, wow, plaster can transform itself into this shiny object. I think about all those things that you made. I think for your BFA, maybe.
Yeah. BFA show.
Mm-hmm.
I've poured plaster into every object that was thrown away that had a cavity, and then I could tear the outside object off, or cut with an X-Acto knife and tear it away, and then reveal the object.
Yeah, it's a kind of very kind of it's not an environmental thing that has a big impact, but it's it's so hard to acquire those packages and then give them up to just nothing if they end up in the landfill. So that kind of translating them into something else, I think I'm always looking for ways to use things in many ways.
I'm really curious about what your work is like now, Marilyn.
Yeah, my work is so far from what you guys are doing. I just am I'm so traditional. And I realize this has all been kind of generated with these talks. And I have this exhibition up in Trisolini, but because of the COVID, we're in all of these video modes, and I don't think anyone's actually seen it very much. So I've basically been doing a lot of, I guess I would call it drawing installation, working on various kinds of panels, and they're kind of a, I actually have to say, I hate trying to describe this from nothing, but they're really kind of grid systems, and grids that for me relate to, they're kind of from me in terms of understanding a form or an object or a space. They're a way of measuring. And right now I'm working on, oh, there I am.
Yeah.
So look how minimal it looks, my goodness. So they're very hot. You know, one of the things that's interesting about this work to me now is that it has this kind of spare, minimal sort of look to it. And it's not, you know, when you're looking at it from far away, you get this kind of, well, what you see, which are like a lot of panels on panels. But when you look at things closer, there's a lot of drawing and detailing going on each one. And sometimes with additional use of color. And I'm interested in how those things relate to the architecture of the space. And you can see here in this image that the ceiling is like totally overwhelming what my work is, but that's camera. That's what the camera's doing. But when you see these things up close, there's a kind of grid system going on with, and they're involved with just divisions and separations and a kind of back and forth visually with what happens on the surface and how the viewer relates to it, both close up and from some distance. And each smaller piece on these kinds of things is like a component of the larger system, and those things shift every time this is reinstalled. So I guess I think of them as kind of conversations that it's hard to translate to photography, but you can get a little bit, I think, of the idea of it. Mm-hmm. We don't have anything close, right? That's okay. So, right, and the more recent ones are large canvas panels that are more individual, and they're really involved with this kind of dialogue between my drawing and the panel itself. So I'm basically on a real simple level measuring it out in 1-inch squares, and then sometimes down to a lot smaller levels in certain places, and trying to make that an accurate measurement on a surface that isn't always doesn't lend itself well to accuracy. And I think of it as a kind of metaphor with trying to navigate the world of division and architecture and compartmentalization. And I think it's why I'm interested in your project, because to me, that's like this large system that you're negotiating between what you do on the internet and what you do with community people and what you do with grant writing and all of that. It just swimming through all of that seems arduous, I guess. And my sort of similarity is that, you know, mine is reduced down to these one panel at a time and just me and the object, which I think is much easier work than what you guys are doing.
I'm curious, when you're making these, do you get into a kind of like meditative space when you're
yeah, it's very comforting, and it's, I think, related to all kinds of traditional arts of textiles, weaving and knitting and making and repetition of all kinds that has to do with needlework, and I think relates to traditions of quilt making and a lot of hand stitching, both for decorative purposes and for functional ones. But yeah, it's absolutely an extremely comforting thing to reduce your world down to, I just have this panel and it's just me and this object. And then when I go back to the rest of the world, I'm fortified, I guess I would say. And it's really, I called this show Over and Over because this body of work is, I think if you look at this work and then you go back to what I was doing 20 years ago, there seems to be hardly any connection, but it really is there. But this does have this kind of, that's probably the strongest aspect of it, is that it is this kind of continuation. And the larger canvas panels, the one that's straight back that you see in the back of the gallery, when I'm working on these, I don't have a space where I can see the whole thing very easily. So it is part of the idea of those, is that they're almost like a little chunk cut out of what would be a lot larger kind of space. Mm-hmm. That these could be endless. They don't have, this is a spotlight here, so it looks like there's kind of an aura in the middle, but it has, I mean, they do get some kind of unevenness depending on where the concentration is, but it's very much about this kind of, you work on something very close. And again, corollary with what you're doing, I mean, you kind of work on one small thing at a time, but that one small thing then fits into the larger whole, but you don't always know that larger whole till you kind of can get back from everything. So there's this like back and forth that happens. To me, that's a very sculptural thing, that, the time and space aspect of this has to do more with a viewer being able to walk around this. But during COVID, we don't have a lot of walking around in galleries. So it's really interesting to me to I'm translating my life into this different way of communicating. And it's making me communicate a lot more about all of this than I ever have.
Yeah, and looking at the canvas in the back, I was thinking about that sculptural concept of cross-scale self-similarity, because you can imagine this is a map for something grand, or it's a map for something very, very small.
Yeah.
That's interesting also, just with like the time of COVID, like we are all in this experience of a grid, through these weird portals through space and time. It's
right.
all
Yeah. It's and I that's a thing that kind of evolved. It didn't occur to me in the same sense. And living around this area of Athens, Ohio, and also like upstate New York, it's like you're not kind of aware of all the divisions of even the mapping out of the country. But certainly if you fly over all of it, you're very, you're seeing very much kind of divisions of property, divisions of fields or land that are just interrupted with natural spaces. So there's a kind of landscape quality to me of them.
Hi, you guys. I hate to interrupt, especially whenever you're talking about, grids and COVID and landscapes and how it all sort of like comes back around to this current climate that we're in. But I feel like we had a little bit of a late start, and we do have a slight schedule that we're trying to adhere to. So I'm going to thank you both for your time and your availability. I know it seems like while we have so much more time to be at home, and I don't know, but then I also feel that we have so much more on our plates that we are stuffing in. So thank you both for taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk with Marilyn.
For coordinating this and doing the whole show. That was a huge lift. Well done. And
Oh,
it's
yeah,
really
yeah.
awesome to see you, Marilyn, and chat a little bit.
Yes, it's good to catch up.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, and congratulations. It sounds like that's a great project and you're able to work together. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
yeah, and congratulations. All right, you all. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to introduce our next guest. It's Crystal Ann Brown, who is an interdisciplinary artist currently working in Buchanan, West Virginia. In 2012, she earned her MFA in Sculpture and Expanded Practice from Ohio University School of Art. Her work acknowledges and sometimes romanticizes the underappreciated aspects of mothering and everyday life through the use of textiles, sculpture, time-based media, social practice, and drawing. Crystal is also the founder and director of the Hound's Den, a nomadic and domestic exhibition space that works to bring new ways of viewing contemporary art to her community. Brown currently teaches in the art department at West Virginia Wesleyan College and is the director of the Sleeth Gallery. When she is not teaching, she is mothering her 2 young children, making art, and sometimes running, but always dreaming. Welcome, Crystal.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's busy and sorry we're a little bit late, but
Fine.
you're welcome to chat, as I said, informally and talk about your practice and your time with Marilyn. And I will be in the wings and can pull up your website as you need, or if you want to talk about some images and previous projects or past projects, whatever you like.
Okay. Thank you so much, Courtney.
I'm going to dip out.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hello. So where are you now? You're in West Virginia.
Yeah, I'm in Buchanan, West Virginia. Yeah. So Bobby and I are both teaching at West Virginia Wesleyan College. It's a small liberal arts school.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's not like Athens. We thought that maybe it would be a little bit we had been in Kansas City for 3 years, and then when Bobby got the position here, we thought, well, it'll be so similar to Athens. There'll be some culture and, it'll be kind of like a bustling college town, but it's much smaller than that. So it was a little bit of a surprise when we got here, but it's good. We like it. Yeah.
So do you want to look at some images? Because I don't know. I guess I've been talking about my work a lot, so this is an opportunity for me to catch up and see what you've been doing a little bit.
Sure. So I've been doing a lot of things, and I did take some time to update my website because I haven't been doing that. The professional practice side of me has kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit, just because of how busy I've been with kids in school, but I do have a few things that we could look at. Maybe we could start, Courtney, could we start with the Lego scans? It should be under art. And these are blind contours that I did of Elliot's Lego blind contours. Thank you. So these are just directly scanned in from the scanner and uploaded. I haven't edited them in any way. But I think it's a good sort of place to start because your work being drawing based and also being a sculptor, I feel like there can be kind of this relationship maybe between the kind of things that you have been making or were making when I was in grad school. Not necessarily that they were like this, but your drawing practice has definitely influenced my drawing practice, I think, in ways. So I didn't have access to like a proper studio and wasn't able to really kind of build much of anything. And I didn't really have a whole lot of time to invest. So these are like, 5-minute blind contour drawings of sculptures that my kid would make. So Elliot would build these like strange objects with Legos. Sometimes they had a purpose. Sometimes they were just kind of pieces stuck together. And then I would kind of quickly draw them while at his Lego table with him. And so it was a way for me to maintain a practice, but also be present with my kid at the same time. And I don't know what these are going to do. They just kind of exist as they are right now. But
yeah, I don't know if you, we had a visiting artist around the time when you were a student. Her name was Taylor Davis. And she showed a piece in which she actually built it blindfolded.
well, that's interesting.
Out of wood, just this idea of how do you focus on certain parts of your senses and maybe minimize some of the other parts in order to get a certain outcome. And how I don't know how old Elliot was when he made these, but when we were talking about yesterday, just in terms of the kind of capability that children can have when they're really young, where they're able to just build and make and draw without editing and without being critical of what they're doing. And I think it's something that we often try to achieve ourselves as artists, that we want to be able to just make and have our ideas manifest themselves. And I think because of the way that we train people, and even from the earliest education, that sometimes it can narrow what people do and what they're able to do rather than expand it. I think especially in drawing. So this is a great thing to see. It'd be interesting to see how would they look three-dimensionally if they were made out of something else in a different scale.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, translating materials. And, this has been translated once from the actual Lego to a 2-dimensional surface, and how it could be interesting to bring it back to a 3-dimensional space again. That's definitely something that I've thought about, but haven't quite figured out how I want to manage that. But I think being a parent has really, I think in grad school my work felt really austere and really minimal, and maybe there was this. I think it made it sometimes hard for viewers to enter my work in a way because of how austere it was. So I've noticed, as being a parent and playing with my kids and engaging with them, the work has become more playful. And maybe I was at that place a long time ago and then kind of lost it. And then now I'm finding my way back to that playful place. So I think this was sort of like the beginning of some of my future projects that I'm working on now. So
these are made drawing directly on a computer drawing pad.
No, these were made it's just I think watercolor paper or something, or maybe Bristol board, and then just a pen, a micron pen, and I just drew them directly on that surface, and then I scanned them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I did a project when we first got here. I'm gonna have to remember what I called it, but I think it's interior spaces. Yeah, I think it's that one, Courtney. Thanks. And then this was my first solo exhibition since grad school, and these are blind contours of the house that we moved into. And then I painted using blue watercolor and blue ink and some gouache on top of them. I also had some cyanotypes that I printed using house blinds, just like window blinds. And I quilted some of them together, and then some of them just existed on their own within those images. And then I also had installed some blinds in the space, and then was thinking about that projection of the lines and the texture that was created when you shine a light through and create a projection.
Yeah, and the way the light also shines through a window and projects onto the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
And what blinds do. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to your MFA thesis, and it was a seascape kind of space. So it's interesting to see the relationship that, I mean, you're kind of speaking of these in a different way, but that kind of seascape or blue environment is similar in some ways to what I remember from the way that piece looked.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I started experimenting more with color after this and thinking a little differently about color and playfulness. And while we were living in Kansas City, I was doing a series of blind contours. And those, Courtney, those are my kitchen blind contours. Those are under art too. And these were created because I didn't have time to make art, and I was working full time, and Bobby was working full time, and Elliot was going to school. So early in the morning, I would just draw for a few minutes these blind contours, and then I'd paint them in. But what happened was I wasn't sure what I was doing with any of this work. And then it was just like the parts kind of came together. So I started to think about color differently. And then later on, I painted them all in as opposed to just a few here and there. And then a couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to do something with them. And so I strung them all up, like stitched them all to this bias tape, and then hung them up kind of like a bunting, and think of them as sort of this limitation on domestic work and labor, and thinking about what that means to me. And I like being in the kitchen. I like baking, and it's a form of anxiety relief for me. But at the same time, I hate doing the dishes, and I hate being tied to like the kitchen in the way that a mother sometimes is tied to the kitchen. And so these blind contours kind of feel a little rough and a little anxious. And I felt like bringing those things together in this way to kind of celebrate, but also, you know, talk about maybe the things I don't like about being in the kitchen too. So
it's also a view on that kind of domestic space of seeing it in a much more beautiful way. Maybe it's just as a counter to the sort of drudgery side of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it definitely is. Like, I feel like as a parent, I'm constantly conflicted between the overwhelming, like almost crushing feeling of the amount of stuff I have to do at home. Like the laundry has really become a big part of my studio practice. And, you know, there's always laundry, there's always dishes, there's always a mess in a corner to clean up. And sometimes that can be really daunting and difficult. And other times the messes can make really beautiful compositions, and they're kind of fun and interesting to look at. And sometimes the laundry piling up is also kind of interesting to look at, and I might draw that. Yeah. And then there's, just moments of like being with your kids. Like it's super fun for me to hang out with my children. I love spending time with them. But I also don't always love folding their laundry or putting it away or, washing 100 spoons because they will use more than one spoon at every meal. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a kind of weight, the whole mundane side of life, that it's almost like it has more, all that domesticity as gravity almost has more weight than ordinary gravity in other kinds of spaces. And trying to find a way, it's not something that ever gets done. And trying to find a way to maintain it and continue your life. I think it's amazing how much actual part of our lives that is. And certainly if you're doing it for more than one person, it's a much, much bigger job. And I'm kind of back to the luxury of living as I please. And I've made peace with just the way I live. And it's not something that is pleasant to look at necessarily. It's just kind of functional. And periodically it will become overwhelming enough I have to kind of deal with it. But it's certainly not the way that spaces have to be maintained for families or even a kind of communal living where you're always working in this community and always every little thing is a kind of negotiation between you and those other people in order to resolve these situations, like how clean do the dishes have to be or how much clutter can you have? And I think work is work. It's a huge amount of work.
Yeah, and it is. And I'm interested in finding ways to incorporate that into my studio practice because it does take up such a big amount of my time. So it cuts into studio practice time. And so I think for the better part of this decade, I've been trying to figure out how do I incorporate my labor, the things that I'm doing every day into my studio practice so it feels like I can maintain and have a studio practice. And some of these things are the ways that I've been able to do that.
I think like one of the things that I've been doing, and I think started doing maybe 10 years ago, were just this kind of idea of as you have time and as you can, you make a small thing.
Yeah.
And then you accumulate the small things. And then you figure out, well, then how can that become a larger thing? Or how does that fit into something larger? And I have to say it's become a useful thing. And right now I'm working on these large panels, but I don't make anything anymore that can't fold up and go in a corner.
Yeah.
Just because it's I don't know, it's too cumbersome and things have to be able to move along with my life in some way. And it is a process of always working on the smaller in order to build the larger. And sometimes it is over a period of years that you're doing smaller things, and then they add up to something that you can put back together as something larger. But it certainly is different than that idea of being able to conceive of a piece. And my practice was for a long time that I would make a drawing of something I wanted to build. And the drawing was usually quite quick and simple to make. And then I had to go through all of this labor of how does that become three-dimensional and physical in an actual space. And I just found over the years, I started dropping out that side that was all of the welding and building and putting together and sanding and packing up and trucking things around, and kind of down to the smaller drawing and how does it fit into the larger piece. And the process has become extremely important to me. I'm like so unwilling now to give up a kind of process that is really engaging, I guess, to me, and also I also kind of meditative in some ways. And it was interesting to just hear from Emily and Elena, because they're taking on these large projects that require all this coordination, and I admire that, but I'm very much, I guess, a little bit like what you're doing here, working from the detail to the larger thing, and I think it lets you use all your time, so that when you get a break, or when there's some time for to do something, it doesn't become having to go to another space or use a lot of equipment or something like that. It does become the kind of really elemental parts of things.
Yeah. I got to listen into you and Heidi talking a little bit yesterday, and I was kind of coming in and out because we were doing some homeschool and running some errands, but I really wanted to watch that conversation. And you had mentioned to Heidi something about making little things, as a parent that was, because Heidi's work was oftentimes like these big ideas too. And so finding little ways to create and to make something small was really satisfying. And I just felt like that really resonated with me too, as, I do have a lot of projects on the back burner that are a little bit bigger, but it is much, I know I hear you, but it is much easier to feel productive and to feel like you're not kind of losing touch with your practice if you're just making things that are small. A little thing every day. And that accumulation eventually becomes something bigger. But I think you had said yesterday that it felt more like a job, like you were employed to the work. And that really resonated with me. Yeah. Because I do have some bigger projects in the works, but it is definitely like, I want to use my hands right now. This requires me to do some like research and thinking, and I don't want to feel employed to it. So I'm going to use my hands right now and then come back to that at another time.
You have one of your projects there.
Yeah, it's Julian. I'm not going to read you a book right now. In a minute.
It's interesting too to see the website and how things fit together, and all these different categories of that you created.
Yeah. Another work that I'm working on right now that feels maybe relevant if we have time, because I know it's 12 o'clock, would be the laundry load, and that's the ongoing performance project. I've made these ghillie suits out of our laundry, and I've been wearing them around and documenting myself in them. And I think that we had been speaking about how this domestic work feels heavy, and in these documents that domestic work it is heavy, and I feel like that suit is kind of, that is.
Yeah, that's what you have on the show. I saw that, and I didn't know what generated it. So that's interesting to see. How do you fasten them?
How do I? Sorry, what was that?
How are they fastened when you do the thing to wear?
So it's a big poncho. So a ghillie suit is like, I don't know if you've seen them, but I think they're really funny. But they're like for hunting, and you wear them and you're camouflaged into the forest and you look like, the leaves of the forest or something. You use them for hunting.
That had a name. That's interesting. Okay.
And so I'm really fascinated by this idea of like camouflaging yourself into a space. And it's been something that's on my mind for a while. And because we have so many piles of laundry in my house, I thought about how fun it would be to try to play hide and seek. And if we were all wearing these ghillie suits, would we be able to find each other in our space if we could hide? And so this project is in progress, but this is sort of like something I've been playing around with, where I've just made mine at this point. I haven't made one for the rest of the family yet. And so this is just me kind of playing around with what it would be like if there was, me wearing this laundry in other settings. Because no matter where I go, I'm always going to come back to a house filled with laundry, like loose clothes all over the place. So just kind of carry it with you,
Yeah, really. So do you, I guess I'm curious about things like, is this the laundry before it's washed or after it's washed, or how do you negotiate that? And the whole idea of when does it come apart and go back into drawers or closets, and when does it go into the washer, and how does that fastening of it together fit with the whole process?
Yeah, I don't really know yet, but I do have a funny story. So I've been using our laundry for other sculptures for a couple of years now. And so Julian's growing and fitting into the clothes that Elliot can wear. And so there have been times where I've needed something for Julian, and I've thought, I know where that is. It's in the sculpture. Like it's in, it's time for me to take that out of storage or out of, when it comes down from an exhibition, I have to remember to take that article of clothing out, whether it be like winter boots or a rain jacket or something that Julian can wear. And then the other day I was taking some photographs of me in the ghillie suit in the gallery on campus while I was installing a show, and Julian's potty trained. And I wasn't planning on being there too long, but he peed his pants and I didn't have any clothes for him. So I had to take the clothes off of the ghillie suit to change him into something dry to get him home. So I think it's this idea of like necessity, and you eventually just need these things, and whether they're like folded and put in drawers or laying on the floor because you didn't have time to put the laundry away, you use them when it becomes necessary.
Yeah, I just got this visual flash of these children finding their way into the gallery and going through your work in order to get their clothes.
Yeah, it kind of happened with Elliot. I think there were some articles of clothing for the summertime that he was just like, Mom, when am I going to get this back? Like, I need this pair of shorts or this, this shirt, because I had installed it over the winter, not thinking that we would need it, for the summer necessarily. So that has happened.
I think it's a kind of ongoing issue. I don't know if it has a thing to do with art, but it sounds like you could do something with it. But just I lose clothes all the time that I think I had, and just how do you keep in order the seasonal changes and be able to kind of manage how that all functions. I think I've always found that everything within the home is actually so much harder to manage than everything outside.
Yeah.
Managing the garden or your job or your car or almost any of whatever else you do there's a real order to that. But within a domestic space, I think it's just, I don't know. I think it's extremely difficult. It's almost like things grow on their own or change on their own. And I live alone. So it's not like there are other people. I know when my child lived at home, my daughter, I would, accuse her of taking things or moving things. But I find I have the same issues now. So though no one's here, it's just that there are things that accumulate in corners and things that disappear. And it's I don't know, product of just not living a spare life, possibly.
Yeah, I think it's the environment, and maybe as makers, it can be kind of challenging to simplify the objects in your home. I know that living with two artists and kids, it can be really hard, I think, to like get rid of things because you don't know when you're going to need them. I mean, it's very possible that I could have gotten rid of all these clothes on a practical level, or at least the majority of them because Elliot grew out of them, but I saved them and, you know, now I'm using them. And so it's an example of like how my mind works at home where I see an object and I'm like, I probably haven't used this or needed it in a good 3 years, but I might someday. So I'm going to hang on to it.
I have used, it's not part of what I do anymore, but I used to save socks. You know, you always have an extra sock. And I've had pieces that ended up with a lot of socks in them. And sometimes they're visible and sometimes they're not. There's a small bronze piece that I think Courtney showed yesterday that's actually part of a sock.
Great.
That kind of became this like tiny landscape piece. But I always found it brought humor to a lot of those things for me.
Yeah, and I think that's what this work is doing for me right now too, is it really is finding
Oh, she's looking for it.
Oh good. I want to see it. Yeah. I'm finding more humor in my work and it becomes more fun and interesting, this idea of like playing hide and seek with my kids and you know, being camouflaged with domestic things and yeah.
That piece there's a piece that has, it also has parakeets and a lot of garden material in it, but I think it does have a bale of socks. And not these bronze pieces, but there's there's another one, I think on a different page. Yeah, so there's a supporting element in this kind of long piece. The birds are in the top part, but then the underneath is actually, it does have some wire in there, but it's basically kind of a bale of leftover socks that is supporting part of this.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I had forgotten about all those sock pieces, but
see, they came in handy, and
yeah. Or it's, you know, the way that part of a piece of clothing will wear out and you can't use it anymore, but the other piece still has a viability and can become something else.
Yeah, definitely. And I did a social practice project that is sort of ongoing called I Will Mend Your Clothes. And I think it came out of this idea of like, we have a lot of clothes, like when your kids, you know, have holes in their pants or their jeans all the time. And, you know, but the pants are still good. They fit. So you fix them. And then I started thinking about that, you know, fixing and mending of other people's clothes and why we keep things around. But yeah, there's a usefulness to these things. And maybe it's not what we intended for them to be, but maybe they become part of a sculpture in some way.
Yeah.
Really
I remember a visual from growing up where my mother would mend, my father was a farmer. So she would mend like the knees of his jeans and things. And she would just in this really kind of crazy, erratic way, run the sewing machine up and down and up and down and up and down. And it was in white thread because that was just there and it was practical. So I don't know if it was ever an issue for him, but I thought it was interesting that she would do that vertically and then do it horizontally and over and over and over to try to build that fabric up again. And it was really a kind of drawing.
Yeah, totally. I was just thinking that as you were saying that it is like a drawing, and I've done that. That's how I've been mending clothes for a while now, is that same process of running it through the sewing machine over and over again, usually with some kind of fabric or substrate underneath to kind of help give it some strength. But then it does become a drawing. And if you use contrasting thread, like you were saying, your mom was using white, probably on like a dark denim, I imagine. So there was probably high level of contrast. So it does become a drawing in a way. Huh.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we at a natural ending here?
A good time, a natural pause.
Mm.
We're about at time, so I just thought I would poke in and maybe say hello and see how y'all are feeling.
Yeah, Courtney, thanks so much for organizing. This is a really nice platform and a really nice way to like have these conversations. It's been really fun to listen to Marilyn talking to old students and seeing work from everyone and Marilyn's work. So I really appreciate it. And Marilyn, I feel like I have to tell you that being like a female sculpture instructor has really, I think, impacted me in really powerful ways as also wanting to be that when I was in grad school and thinking about that. And I don't know if I maybe really thought about it too much at that time, but looking back now, I can see like how it just felt possible just because you were doing it too. And Courtney, you also had that kind of influence on me too as a parent working and going to school. Your practice also had an influence, like, okay, this is manageable, this is possible. So for both of you, thank you. I owe a lot to both of you for being that kind of inspiration. So
I think it can be deceptive when you see someone doing it and maybe you it's manageable.
Yeah, I think it can, but it also feels possible. And I think that's the important thing is that when you see it, like, it is hard. The work that we do and that I'm doing right now is hard, and I'm not getting a lot of sleep, and that's fine. But, at least it's possible. And I know that it's possible because people have done it before me, and it's an inspiration. So
yeah, you see all this gray hair?
Yeah, I mean, it's coming for sure. I definitely am like, yeah, it's exhausting, but it's worth it.
It's good. Yeah, I think having the exhibitions going on and then being able to talk so you can both catch up with your lives a little bit, but then also bounce off onto the work and just the idea of having those two shows going on consecutively makes a link that I don't know that we would have been able to do this without that. So great. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that it's also this, a remoteness, we wouldn't have been able to do this, maybe we would be able to do it in person, and that would have been fine and all. But I mean, historically, the fall exhibitions have sort of fallen into this sort of, a faculty member who is retiring, and then some sort of alumni. This is the first time that the exhibition will be has been in our galleries, but and then alumni would maybe come back into town, and we'd have a big celebration and do sort of a symposium. And I felt like this was the best alternative to that. So I'm glad that it has worked out in the way that it has. And I've really been enjoying kind of like listening and, delving into other people's work. And, I think that this platform has worked well for that too. So it's all new, and it's been, I think we'll probably continue to use it for the unforeseeable future.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning when I woke up and reflecting on how well yesterday went. I thought it went really well. And I was like, wow, this could be like a new way to engage with people who are living anywhere in the world. And if they can't, if you can't be in a physical space for whatever reason, it really kind of allows for more opportunities for people and kind of evens the playing field for, people who might not be able to travel very far for whatever reason. So
that's absolutely true. And I think also even for like visiting artists in classrooms and all of that stuff. I mean, I was doing it last year in my BFA senior classroom, my practicum, having Skype for two years prior, Skyped in studio visits, or like where they would come and speak to the class, and the class was prepared. They've researched the websites, had questions in order to have that engagement. But, you know, the visitor would essentially give sort of a presentation and then, you know, then have interaction with the students about, you know, where they are in their practices now. And that was really, really great. And, you know, budgets get into, you know, monetarily speaking, that's a, you know, more affordable. You're not paying for airfare or hotels or, you know, that kind of thing. But you're still kind of having the experience, albeit a different one. So yeah, it's a concession for sure. But, you know, we were all of the world of, you know, in grad school. I mean, we had Sharon Hayes come to our studios. I mean, we had, you know, Nato Thompson come and speak. I mean, like, Hamza Walker. I mean, we've had amazing visiting artists like throughout the history of, you know, art plus design, you know, but I just think about that our grad students and our undergrads now don't have that kind of real intimate one-on-one, like where you're in the studio for like a good 45 minutes to an hour with this amazing, you know, artist, you know, so I don't know. Concessions, we'll take little here, little there, and hopefully we all turn out okay.
Yeah. I tell my students that too. Like, there's good things like any medium, any format that you're using for anything, be it drawing or plaster or something. There are good things and bad things that you can do. Like, there are benefits and disadvantages to any kind of medium, and working this way offers its advantages, and it also offers disadvantages too. But
yeah. Own it. All right. Well, I will let you get on with your world if you wish. Marilyn and I will maybe stay on and talk a little bit. Yesterday we spoke a lot about her work, which was the intention, but we wanted to maybe get into a little bit of where my work is and what I'm doing. So we'll talk a little bit about that and wrap up. So thank you so much for coming and, you know, spending the time. I know it's hard with smaller kids. I mean, so thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm really glad that I could fit it in. So I appreciate all the different time slots options you gave us for meeting. That was perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. Bye.
Bye. So it was kind of funny thinking about our time slot availabilities with, like, you know, I'm starting my PhD, and so I have some classes times that I have to attend class in the morning, and then, you know, your availability of when you're teaching, and, you know, when we are all kind of at our best and all of that stuff. So it was kind of fun to offer these time slots, you know, and getting everybody lined up.
Yeah, it's worked out well.
Yeah. So I wanted to, I guess it's a good segue after, you know, Crystal's work. You know, she became pregnant in grad school, and, you know, I had Chloe, who at the time when I started grad school was 4. She turned 5 right away. She has a fall birthday, but, you know, being pretty young mother, I wasn't a young mother. I was 35, or, you know, that's not like, you know, I was 30 when I had her. So, I mean, like, but having a young child in grad school, it was like I remember being up in the ridges, and like all of the grad students were sort of her older siblings and parents. And it was just this community of people who would always, if she came with me to the studio, she would be off in somebody else's studio 9 times out of 10, you know, and then she'd come back or whatever. But I know you got to see some of the performance footage that's on YouTube of the new iteration, but I wanted to maybe show a picture of the previous, or the very first one, although I don't have the very first one, which, if you recall, was in the ridges, and it it was just us. I mean, it was a really small group of people
Yeah.
that Louise had documented, Louise O'Rourke. And, you know, it was a really, and this is shortly thereafter, maybe a year later. And I was testing it out for, my thesis work. I don't know why it's doing that flashy thing.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the parallel quite when I was mentioning the idea of weight and gravity of domestic work, but you're demonstrating it physically here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what, I mean, I remember whenever I first did the piece, you know, afterwards, you know, I didn't know how it would end. So, you know, we had practiced and tried adding the stuff on the end of the seesaw. And then it wasn't until we did the live performance that it was in one of those exhibition spaces, you know, at the Ridges. And we had reached this sort of balance point, and I asked Chloe if she wanted to get down, if she was okay. And she said, no, I'm fine. And I was like, oh, okay, so I guess I'll wait until she's ready, you know. And that was this really crucial kind of realization to my mothering and my art making, and to the piece itself, that her participation in it, which is her participation in my life, my participation in her life, is all about that give and take, and that, you know, I can only do it as long as she is able to kind of be okay. And then whenever she's no longer okay, then I have to stop and go attend to her, or whatever the case may be. So, so yeah, this iteration, this was just for camera, because like I said, I was testing it out for my thesis in Trisolini Gallery, and it was in the summer, I think the summer before 2000, so it was probably 2012 or something. No, 2011. And she was little.
Yeah, I think over time, one of the things that's really interesting to me, seeing the newer one, is that there's a way in which a small child can be almost like a package in some way. They're not always a docile package, but they do have this kind of pocket where they fit. They have to fit in your life. And it just gradually becomes more and more that their life becomes stronger and stronger and larger. And seeing the more recent one where we're actually hearing from her a great deal. So understanding her as a person instead of part of the cargo, I think is really interesting for the viewer to transition through.
Yes, I have some images of that too that I want to share. So that cargo is pretty large now. and I was really excited about the way that, you know, much like the first piece, she and I had gone into the gallery. I think I had to go get a cordless drill or something to bring back to my home studio. And I was like, come on in and just check out the show and see the seesaw, because we were going to be performing. So, you know, it was kind of like, just come on in and check it out, and let's see, you know. And then we got on and we started talking, and we were talking about the piece and sort of thinking about what it would be and how it would be. And as we were talking, we started to say, yeah, well, this is the piece. I mean, this is what is our relationship now is so much dialogue and back and forth. I mean, what was lovely is Lalana had seen it, and she said it was just like sitting at your kitchen table. You know, it was really this sort of intimate experience of like almost like sitting in on somebody else's conversation. And you can see us looking at our phones, and we were, you know, I had made it available to everyone to sort of text, Instagram message, you know, Facebook Messenger Live, like everything, just blow up our phones and say hey or do whatever. And we were just kind of getting, and which is so similar to our worlds, that is so mediated by our phones, and especially a teenager who, you know, my husband always says, like, in the future, kids are going to have like their phones, their hand. It's like they just won't even have a hand anymore. It's just going to be a phone, and they'll just be like, "Whoa, this phone!" like an amputee. Like they'll get it surgically implanted. But I mean, that's also how we communicate, and so I kind of was interested in embracing that. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I find it's conversations with most people now segue into phone information and back again on a regular basis. It's like we're connecting to outside information as well as having a dialogue. Another thing I was thinking about was just this, you know, I mean, you're much more visually like two adults together. Even though I know there's a huge difference between being 16 and being
however old I am.
Whenever we get to be actually adults, I don't know. But one of my experiences with parenting was, and I was confronted with this, that I had kind of acted as though my job was finished. I maybe after college, after finished college, or I also assumed that we could deal with this other person as though they were an adult, and that we were magically going to become two adults together. And there were just a lot of bumps there. And it's not a relationship like you could have with another adult. It's a completely unique kind of relationship that always comes back to mother child, and what that entails and what the history of it is. And just that there's, again, back to this idea of gravity. I learned the hard way many times that there was a gravity to what I would say in our relationship that didn't, at times seemed to me quite offhand, or an action that I would do something or say something that was very ordinary to me, but was perceived by the other person as a completely different thing, just in terms of weight.
Yeah. And you know, these in between years, I think, tend to be also where language almost isn't, it's a different kind of language. You know, there's you have to understand their language, and they have to try and understand your language, which, you know, and I think that's where what you're sort of talking about is sort of that lost in translation, when you say like, okay, so I want you to vacuum the floor and unload the dishes, translates into, I don't need to do that until 9 o'clock at night or something. Like, no, I don't know.
Another thing that's interesting about this recent piece to me was listening to Chloe talk about your work.
Yeah.
What her perception of it was, and also how she might talk about it to her friends or other people, that it was being translated through I guess a completely different perception of life than you might have as an artist yourself.
Yeah, I mean that was everything. I mean, and showing images is like a poor kind of a poor representation of what the actual performance was, and that can only be viewed. You just have to watch the video, and I love that aspect of it, that the images don't quite represent the piece, but I also love that our language and our discussion is what actually replaces all the stuff, in a way. Like, the stuff is still there, but she does her own laundry. She's responsible for the dishes. I still buy groceries. I still do a lot of the cooking, but yet she can still, so it's like that. It's not fully equal by any stretch of the imagination, but the shift has occurred, and it's not going back. So like, I wanted to really make that kind of conscious visual decision. And then we had wireless mics, because I knew that the dialogue, which has never been a part of the work before, was going to be important to the work, because it was half of, if not more, of the work. So
yeah, that's a real shift from it being this very, very visual work to now it really is about language and communication and what is said to each other.
Yeah. And I guess I was going to show some of the older images of things that referenced, I don't know, should I go into that? Some of the stuff, like all the stuff I had sort of, for the past 10 years, all of my work has been about, mothering a child who was, 5 to 13. And then it's been a conscious sort of shift in thinking about a practice that is no longer true to representing that relationship with the child. So I feel like I struggled for the past couple of years in how to represent what my current condition of mothering is, if that's my like some sort of outlining of my practice, which is how I've kind of like, built this body of work around, which isn't just the performance piece. I'll show the one. I have two that I want to show, but one is
I think it'd be great to see some of the other pieces.
The Fabric of Life, which is this, floor to ceiling. This is like, I think this is like 14 feet tall by 12 foot. And it's, floor to ceiling weaving of household items that, so it's the idea of the stuff from the seesaw then moved to a pedestal in another work, and then floor to ceiling sculptures in another piece called the Mother Load. And then this is Fabric of Life, that was the next iteration with, books have always been a part of it. It's construction. There's a little scale, but yeah, you can see like how tall that it actually was. And Chloe was a lot littler than two. Yeah. But the books, have always sort of made up this sort of base of my practice. And so they're always represented, whether on the seesaw or in the pedestal, floor to ceiling sculptures, or this weaving, they've always been a part of that.
It reminds me a little bit of something that was discussed yesterday, just a little in terms of how things are seen when you're looking across them, or how they're seen horizontally. Sometimes because of all the overlapping and spatial intervention, that you're able to perceive something. But once you put it up visually this way, it's like it's overwhelming amount of things that support the way that we live. And I think we're unaware often of how much actual volume of things are required, or that we use whether required or not.
Right. And you could, Hillerbrand and Magnuson are another parent, husband, wife, artists who work with objects in the domestic space and with their children. And they talk a lot about, consumption and sort of American, like hoarding and using, and keeping and that kind of thing. And while, this work is akin to that, I'm primarily sort of talking about the stuff that exists in one's life when you have a child versus whenever you don't have a child. I mean, there's the certain things that sort of, really symbolically and metaphorically, like literally, like I wouldn't have tiny little chair and desk in my house if I didn't have a child. I would maybe have the disco lamp, but I don't know. But it's just all that stuff that, accumulates, whether it's a hand-me-down or, I mean, this is like from my little sister's bed sheets and they were used for my child, and
I think one of the things too is that in kind of any kind of communal living, you give up maybe some of the aesthetics or the choices that you would make yourself, so that there are these intervening aspects of what someone else's view is and what things that become important to them. Mm-hmm. And in recognizing that importance, there's often a kind of invasion of all of that stuff that on your own you might not have.
Yeah, exactly.
This is interesting to see these books. I find myself, because we see so many people online now,
mm-hmm.
News broadcasters, all sorts of people being interviewed, that people put open or like presenting themselves in front of their bookshelf.
Yeah.
And often you can like scan. I'm interested in what kind of art they have up, and also what books they're choosing to show. So I think that's an interesting.
That's so funny.
Aspect of just the way we communicate now. It's
right.
Like not, maybe bringing a book to share with someone, but it's going to be on your shelf in the back, and every one of those is kind of a whole self-portrait of who you are, how you want to be seen,
perceived. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's just my work and my research, but yeah.
This is I think I also really like the humor in this, in which it's there's a kind of logical piling of things, and then all of a sudden there seems to be like, oh, there's a ladder in there, or there's a plant, or there's an aquarium, or all of the kind of many ways that things come together.
Yeah. I think these are your legs right here. I was like, I took this lovely picture of you and Dwayne in the gallery, and I was like documenting it. And I was like, wait, these are my two mentors. Like,
that's interesting.
I didn't get you. I mean, you're like behind the.
We were discussing the piece. I wouldn't have recognized myself. Looks like I'm wearing it a bit.
No. Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. I feel so, but it was lovely to have both of you after so many years of like not being, in the studio together, and then to have you both in that space while I was documenting the work before anybody else had any artwork in the space, kind of thing. And
yeah, I mean, we've had many years of kind of forging a relationship in terms of teaching and being two really different people.
Yeah.
And I think that, kind of as it's kind of coming to some conclusion, it's just interesting to recognize what that, a lot of things about that balance, that I always, where if you're teaching with another person, even if you're not actually in the classroom, that you're teaching with them in a way. You become aware of maybe how they've approached something or what they've said. So oftentimes I still find myself in a kind of three-way conversation, where I'm, in a way you're talking to the other teacher. And a lot of relationship among the faculty is kind of like that. You might not talk to someone, but through students, you'll hear what that other person thought about something or how they approach something. And you get to know them in this kind of strange, kind of segued thing. And it's interesting to do this morning and yesterday, because I'm like seeing these connectors of how students have like connected back to what their education is or was and what they're doing now, and just the kind of number of people dealing with aspects of nature and ecology is a really interesting thing.
Yeah.
And kind of knowing that people all spend time here in this part of Ohio, and the influence that I think that has, and also just the different, aspects of ideas that come from two different faculty that bring up two different ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I actually brought up Melissa McLeod's website because the bees and how different her work sort of addressed that idea, but the similar content of like preservation and, reverence and that kind of thing. So
I was thinking about that a little bit, but I didn't quite know how to completely describe it. But from her view, it seemed to have so much more to do with this kind of admiration and reverence for what the bee did itself. And I think Elena and Emily's has that, but they're really making it productive in the world and with kind of collaborative idea to make a change in society. So that's it's interesting to see both of those things. And
here's Melissa's thesis.
And it doesn't show, the images don't quite give you the impact of of what's being projected onto all of that.
No, right.
That's again what you can see of the whole and not what you can see of the detail, but these are all really beautiful images of the bees themselves.
I think this video is what plays on top of the projection. I can't recall, but it's a beautiful video. This.
Yeah, this is that providing places and nurturance for them. Interesting in a really different kind of way, where you can actually see them. I think, you kind of become in the bee society here a little bit when you're looking at this.
Yeah.
And imagining, I think their enjoyment of it a little bit. So it's really interesting kind of viewpoints on the same subject.
Yeah. I like that. And I want to, again, there's another female, alumni sculptor working with bees and in very different ways. And, just thought of it. So give her a little shout out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much good work that we could go on for hours and hours.
I thought of, if we started talking about all of the people's work that have been at OU in the sculpture program over the years, we would have to have many programs. So we've left that out.
Yeah.
It's would be another great show.
Yes. I was looking for, I don't think I scanned in the one of you and your daughter, but I wanted to sort of segue also. Well, yesterday I showed the image here. That's right here. So I'll just show it again because I'm going to segue to another part. But, you know, the other kind of theme that we've had in these past couple talks is women artists who are also mothers. And so there was that. And then I wanted to talk about this. What happened? There we go. So here's the other. This is your daughter too, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So in a much older version, but still with you and Molly, right?
Well, actually, this is a part of the shift because I'm with her.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
she's not with me.
Okay.
So this doesn't have a lot to do with my practice, I guess, in a way, except that I don't know. When you showed a lot of photographs of me from the past, I remembered this one. So Julia was a Peace Corps volunteer in Mali, 2001, 2002, in that time period. And I went for a visit and spent some weeks and was able to travel and see a great deal. And she was in a small village outside of Bamako, Gulankaro. It's close. Well, it's very rural, and this village is named after a tree from the region, and it's traditional in visiting that you do something for the village. And the kind of community liaison there wanted me to paint a nutrition chart, and I was like, no way, I'm not painting So I just came up with the idea of including this tree and a kind of landscape, and made this very, very simple painting, which is not, I don't think, as consequential as just the actual aspect of it. And this is like an artist's dream in a way. You can see I have this very enthusiastic audience who are just mesmerized by all of this. And they paid me to do this in the end, just before I left, with, I think, some chickens, a couple of chickens. I think there might have also been a goat that, that I gave back. But it was just a very enjoyable time, and also a kind of real privilege to visit a society and a program, and I mean a country in a time when you could be there.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I've found about traveling, is just that there are windows when you can be able to go. Essentially, you're a visitor, but be able to go and participate in someone else's way of life. Take a little of yours with them. And there are times when those windows close, and it just becomes so much less possible. So this is a time period when I, and again, the idea of this, I'm with her here instead of with me. And I did a lot of traveling during this time period, but a lot of it included every time she went somewhere, I was like, I'm coming to visit.
Yeah.
So I was able to go to spend some time in Bangkok and the area around there. And of course, this time in Mali, and many visits to New York City.
Yeah.
It all have to do with glomming on to her travel.
I can only hope that Chloe travels as much as Julia has, because I can see myself doing a very similar thing. Well, I don't know if your stomach is grumbling as much as mine is, but I don't know if we should maybe pause for today. And
good time.
Okay. I wanted to show those couple of pictures, and I felt like my current version of Imbalance With, and then seeing those images of Julia, it seemed like similar, where that shift, that we were talking about had sort of happened. And yeah, we'll see where it all goes.
Thank you very much. And we'll do it again.
Sounds good. I'll see you next Thursday.
Okay. Okay.
So we have next Thursday. It is the 15th. That's actually Chloe's birthday. We have Amy Pryor at 12:20. So I'll be advertising that. And then the following day is on the 16th, on Friday, is Pocket Toscani at 11 a.m. So everybody look for announcements on Instagram and check the Facebook event page for any updates. And thank you, Marilyn and
Thank you.
Emily and Elena and Crystal for today. It was a lot of fun again. So
Okay.
until next time. Yes, we'll see you soon. Thank you.